Yes, everybody, you know what time it is. It's your boys Jack and Michael here, the one and only. You know him from the fan shows, our dedicated Polish fan, very knowledgeable Polish fan, and long-suffering Spurs fan, as we like to sort of introduce ourselves. But everybody, we are going to be having a conversation here on do Spurs, still at this moment in time, still at this stage of the season, do you feel like we still have a finishing problem? Do we have a problem with putting away the chances that we create? I think Spurs don't really have much a creativity problem. We're still up there with some of the most chances created of any side, but I still feel like we don't bury our chances as much as, at least personally, I think that we should. But also, we have some stats to maybe suggest that I'm being a little bit, harsh on us. So we're going to have a good conversation about it. Have some good questions lined up, and we're going to be asking Michael and help prepare and answer this question of: do we still have a finishing problem at this stage of the season? Michael, I'm going to start you off with, you know, so far Spurs have actually scored 56, and according to the XG algorithm, we're on 47. So it means that we've actually outperformed the XG. And in fact, of teams that have been outperforming their XG, we're second highest in the league. I think behind Arsenal are the ones that are also the most clinical of any teams in this Premier League. Good company to be with. Unfortunately, it is Arsenal, but they've been probably one of the most lethal of any teams this season. Just going to start off first. Am I waffling with this question? Am I going a bit ridiculous by suggesting that we have a finishing problem? If, according to the stats and according to the XG algorithm and all that stuff, we're actually quite clinical.
Yeah, so I think one of the reasons why the XG table compared to goals scored looks like it is because of the way XG is calculated, in my opinion. So for those who don't know, watching us, XG, like depending on the site and the algorithm, but usually like the most important things that it takes into consideration is placement of the shot. So basically where you shoot from, how many defenders are around you, if they are in front of the ball, and it doesn't take into consideration who takes the shot, right? So basically it just looks at, listen, in history there were 1,000 shots taken from that exact spot with those like combinations of defenders around, and this is how many were scored. That's how we determine the XG, right? And the reason why I bring this up is because the way we play, especially against like the weaker teams, let's call them, I think we try to like suffocate them and just push them into their own box. So often when we take shots from inside the box with defenders around us, the XG ironically might not be as big as you would think. Yeah, so for especially with like let me give you like the best example I can think of is the goal that Sonny scored against Arsenal in the 2-2 draw, right? The one, not the one from the press on Jorginho, but the other one. There were three players around him: Rice, Gabriel, and Saliba, right? But the shot was taken from like 4 meters, and because it was Son taking the shot, it was pretty much like, I don't want to say guaranteed to end up in the back of the net, but again, the XG algorithm doesn't take into consideration that it was Son taking the shot. It just takes the fact that there were 3 defenders around him and the angle was quite tight, right? So the XG, I wouldn't be surprised if it was like 0.15 or something like on it, right? But because it's Son, because of the like the way we created the chance, I think that's why we are overperforming the XG model in a sense, right? Because we have a clinical finisher like Son, and because we often score in a tight, like packed situation, right? That's why I think the XG model might be lower than what we actually scored.
And when you feel like in general this season, would you say that Spurs, when there is a clear-cut chance, when we are played through on goal, or when you just expect us to score, do you think Spurs have been the team that do bury it, or do you think Spurs have been the team that have missed it? And this is, of course, I've gone from using a very legitimate stat, and you have also provided good context to the XG, that it's not the end-all be-all, plenty of context that needs to be understood when analyzing those stats. But, put you in, less of a stat mind frame. Someone's played through on goal, the Spurs team. Let's say it isn't Sonny. Do you feel like they're going to put it away? Because for the most part this season, I would say no. I'd say we're going to miss it.
Yeah, I think that's the key part of the question, right? If it's Son getting put through on goal with the ball in behind, I think it's pretty much like a guaranteed goal. The quality with which this guy finishes those type of chances, it's absolutely like one of a kind.
Is it
But yeah,
also the context of a lost Harry Kane? Because we always had Sonny, who was easily the most clinical player in the Premier League, then probably combined with the next most, if not the other most
yeah,
clinical player in the Premier League. Could it be that, like I said, this feeling that I have, this sort of, yeah, this opinion, really, there's almost not much basis to it. Do you think that's where it also could be coming from? A bit of bias that, yeah, we've probably missing, and someone who had gotten used to one of the most clinical strikers in the Premier League, and now we only have one of them instead of two of them. Could that be also the reason?
yeah. I think we as Spurs fans are kind of used, especially because of the style
Used to
of
good
play that
forwards.
we,
Yeah.
yeah, but especially because of the style of play we played under Conte and Mourinho. I think if we created a chance, it was usually like not, I don't want to say a guaranteed chance, but rarely did we score like something out of the blue with the possession and putting in a low cross or whatever, right? It was usually just Kane spraying the balls to Son or Kane
Hmm.
magic from
Yeah.
the header, and they were
Individual
so
brilliance.
they are so good, both of them, at finishing chances that I don't want to say that we should lower our standards, but I think we should adjust basically what we expect of our forwards. That doesn't change the fact that I think some of the chances we created for Johnson and Werner and even Kuluseski this season, where they were put through pretty much one on one against the keeper and they like miss the goal entirely or shoot
Hmm.
directly at the keeper. I think they still need to do better in those circumstances, right? Like I said, they have Son to learn from, right? So if there is anyone to teach them how to do it, I think it should be Son. Right?
And this season, what's interesting is, I'm going to use another feeling here, but do you feel like players have been perhaps a bit unselfish or too unselfish, too reluctant even to score? Because back in the day, using Kane and Son as examples, they love to assist each other, but they weren't guys to probably pass it to anybody else, right? And even so, sometimes they would look off each other because they know they can score and they back themselves to bury it. I wouldn't say that with the rest of anybody else in this team, really. They actually feel like, would you agree with me, players that would rather somebody else finish the chance, it kind of feels like. And
Yeah,
Kulusevski, I put in that mold. And dare I say, James Madison is maybe an example I put in that mold as well, where they actually have the chance to score, they have the chance to shoot, and they give it to somebody else to do it for them, or they make it even harder on themselves and make it harder on the team by being so indecisive with whether it should be them to score or somebody else to. And do you agree with me there? I know it's another feeling versus kind of, any
Mhm.
sort of stats, but do you think Spurs this season, as compared to other seasons, are actually too unselfish, too reluctant to shoot?
Yeah. I think we have a lot of, let's call them providers instead of finishers. I
Hmm.
think, or at least guys that want to be providers, not the finishers, right? And now you can like pose a question whether it's because they just prefer it that way, or whether they just don't want the responsibility of like taking a shot, right? Because especially with like Werner, I'm not surprised the guy doesn't have confidence in his shooting with the amount of misses over the past like 3 years of his, right? But that doesn't change the fact that there are plenty of situations where he should be the one to try and finish, right? And I think similar case can be made for Kulusevski. Although with Kulusevski, with Kulusevski, it's a bit ironic because I want to say he is the provider type, but often he just cuts in on the left and shoots. But what
I
he
think he
was
makes the
doing,
wrong decision, actually, a lot of the
yeah,
times, actually, in the final third. When he shoots, he shouldn't be shooting. And then when he passes, it's like, what the hell are you doing? You have the most
yeah,
clear shot on goal in front of you. And I'd actually put it, this is a very Yank term, a very American term to use. But there's a thing that in baseball where we say a player has the yips. And I personally think he has the yips whenever he gets in front of, a goal scoring situation. He seems to freeze up in his mind. It's not like you can tell in his body, but you see in his mind that it's not like the decision seems to come so easily and so straightforward to him. He actually seems to really be struggling in the moment of like, should I shoot or should I pass? And when you are in that mindset of indecisiveness in those moments, even if you make the right decision, I think the fact that you already are nervous in doing it, you're probably not even going to execute it even in the right way. So even if he makes the right decision to shoot, because he looks so kind of indecisive in it, the shot's going to be tame, or it's going to be not in the way that we would have expected it to be. That's actually good enough to go into the back of the net. Or if even he's indecisive over the pass is under hit, or the pass is slightly askew or something. It seems like I would put him down for as a guy that creates a lot of chances and starts a lot of moves for Spurs. But Kulusevski, I think, falls in that mold of a guy that really, I would say, has actually let us down, I think, on plenty of occasions this season when it comes to actually being clinical in the final third. His his expected assists, would suggest actually that there are some players that haven't buried some chances that he has put up. Because I think last time I checked or something, his actual assists are like around like 3 or so kind of like points or whatever, compared to the expected assists. I think he has around like 8 or 9, and he only has like 5 or 6 assists this season. So it does show that maybe some players, some huge
I think he has
between
3 assists or something, right?
Yeah.
It's absolutely crazy because like a lot of people give this stat of like he creates the
But then
most
also,
chances
just
in
quickly, his
Europe.
XG
Yeah.
is actually his XG is actually lower than, or his XG actually has him, I think, lower than an actual goals scored. So I could again be just using feelings versus the actual stats on paper. Stats on paper suggesting that he has buried the chances that he should. In fact, even more chances than he should have buried. Whereas I feel like that's the complete opposite. I would feel like he's missed plenty of chances where he should have scored. And then also his expected assists would show that they should be helping him out more when it comes to the chances that he's creating.
Yeah, Kulusevski is a really like interesting case. I honestly, if you told me like at this point of the season he would have like twice the amount of goals compared to assists, I wouldn't believe you, because like for me the profile of player that he is, I expect him to assist more than to actually score, right? And the ironic thing is like the chances that he scored weren't necessarily easy, if I recall correctly, right? Some of the goals that he has, right, aren't easy chances, but it just feels like that he basically just doesn't finish the easy chances, and he provides a lot, but maybe I would have to like see, because you said about the expected assists, right? But I would have to compare the expected assists to the amount of like chances created, because sometimes I feel like he creates a lot of chances, but those chances aren't easy to finish necessarily. I'm not saying that he shouldn't have more assists. I think he should have way more assists than he does currently. But I think like the algorithm that determines whether like the chance was created or not is usually like pretty, I don't want to say basic, but basically if you like pass the ball to someone and they take a shot, and no matter how like the quality of the shot, it's counted as a chance created. So I would
could
have
be a
to
bunch
like
of quarter chances kind of built up, to a pretty high expected assist. Maybe it's not entirely composed of clear-cut chances just missed, by the player. Maybe it's all kind of built up over time. Would you say, Michael, though, like in the beginning of the season, everybody had said, oh, the goals are going to be shared around. We don't need a Harry Kane or a top clinical striker because everybody's going to do their part in the system. Everybody gets to score goals. There's going to be chances for everybody. Yet when you look at it, Sonny has the most goal contributions with 22. Not much of a surprise there. But then there's a big drop off to the second player, which is Richarlison with 13, Madison with 11, Johnson with 10, Kulusevski with 9. Do you feel like, the fact that Kulusevski started 25 games, Madison started 18 games, and is actually less or fewer goal contributions than Richarlison, maybe Sonny and Richie are kind of the only 2 players this season that have really totally done their part when it comes to actually sharing the goals around, sharing the assists around, like everybody had said, because we've been so used to just Kane and Son pretty much having the majority of them. Maybe somebody else pops up with 5 or 6 or 7 or something. But when you look at it this season, I mean, we only have 3 players above 5 goals scored. Kulusevski's one with 6. Richarlison's the other with 10, and then Sonny. We only have, if you put it at 7, then there's only 2 players that are above 7 goals scored in the Premier League. Do you think they actually have been doing enough in terms of sharing the goals around? Madison, Johnson, Kulusevski?
I think And again, it's really a difficult like discussion to make, because the stats kind of work against us, but that doesn't mean that stats are wrong necessarily, right? It's because I think Johnson, Kulusevski, Madison, they all should, in my opinion, have more goal contributions than they do right now.
Yeah.
And it's not only because of someone not finishing the chances they create, but also them not finishing the chances, right? But then you look, as you said, you look at our goals scored versus goals expected goals, right? And we are like 12 above or something stupid like that, right? So it kind of works against my argument, but I think you have to like take many things into consideration. I honestly, especially from Kulusevski, with the amount of minutes that he had, I don't want to like put a spotlight on him, but I think he is like the worst offender in terms of like not actually giving us numbers, right? As you said, he has like 9 goal contributions in 20, what was it, 28 matches, 26 matches,
25,
something
yeah.
like that, 25 matches, right? That's, for me, that's not good enough, right? Like a winger with the amount of chances that he creates and we create for him, I would at least expect him to be at like 13, 14, like,
For
like
example,
6 goals, 8 assists.
Dave and I are pretty hard on Brennan Johnson every now and again, and like he has 4 goals and 6 assists. He actually has 1 more goal contribution in the Premier League than Kulusevski. And we all know the narrative around Johnson can be different to Kulusevski. A lot of people have time for Kulusevski. Not everybody seems to have time for Johnson. And Johnson, with 10 fewer starts, has 1 more goal contribution than Kulusevski does. And everybody loves to talk about the underlying numbers with Kuluveski, the background numbers, that make up who he is, the unseen sort of things, right, that make up who he is. Yet you just look at core numbers, regular stats, like just on paper output, Johnson has better output, right? And just says a lot about, I think, that sort of question of, are the players that we do regularly play, the players that we do expect to get this sort of output out of, are they all doing their part? The funny thing is, like Kulusevski, yes, I love him. I praise him and defend him constantly. But then when I look at him versus a Johnson, 10 fewer starts, and how hard I've been on him this season, like it does make me question. Does make me question. I don't think Johnson's by any means has been absolutely spectacular, but then that just makes me feel like there's a bit of context needed with then Kulusevski, because has Kulusevski then been doing his part? Also, even James Maddison, right? The guy who's pretty much brought in as a version of a Harry Kane replacement. Wasn't going to replace all of Harry Kane, but was going to be brought in to replace the creativity. And we also knew that he was supposed to be a goal-scoring midfielder. He scored 10-plus goals in his last time in the Premier League, right? And this season, he has 1 more start than Richarlison. He has 2 fewer goal contributions. He has 4 goals and 7 assists. Richarlison has 10 goals and 3 assists. Kind of makes you think, like, has Maddison really been doing his part, like actually in kind of the total numbers that we would have expected him to produce? That's what I'm kind of coming from. It feels like maybe, yes, the underlying numbers of key passes, goals minus expected goals, all kind of suggest that Spurs are doing their part. But then there's some other things when you look at just the original sort of players that we all thought would be doing their part, sharing the goals, sharing the output. I wouldn't say they are, really. I think we've actually been very much carried by certain players, carried by Sonny, absolutely. I think Richarlison, as much as people hate the guy, clearly has done his part. The fact that he is the second highest goal scorer with 10 goals, and the next person is with 6. Like, come on, Richie has definitely been doing his part. And is also the majority of those goals were scored while Sonny actually was out on international duty. Poro's on 7 assists, right? Like Sar's on 3 goals and 3 assists. You think of some of those forwards, some of those wingers of Maddison, Johnson, Kulusevski, I think they could be doing a bit more when it comes to the output. So I might say, Michael, that all these stats are stacked up against me here, but I'm going to say that Spurs do, in fact, have a finishing problem, because the original theory was that everything was going to be a bit more shared around. Everything was going to be a bit more equal between all the players, because we wouldn't need to be as dependent on individual brilliance from others. And I wouldn't say that's been the case this season. Clearly, we have been more reliant, just as we were in other seasons, on just individuals bearing the chances and finishing whatever comes their way. And Sonny's done that. Richarlison's done that. And then other players that we wouldn't expect to have done that, like Sar and Poro and whatnot. But the guys who we would have thought would have stepped up, I wouldn't say have.
Yeah, so it's basically, it's nothing wrong with having like a star player who has like majority of the goal contributions. Like most of the teams, when you look at like the numbers, right? Especially City, maybe not this season because Phil Foden has stepped up massively and he has a lot of goal contributions.
Good point.
But last season, I think Haaland had like 50 something goal contributions for them, right? Overall competitions. And then the next person had like 20 or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's nothing wrong in having that star player. We are just making, and I think I back you in this approach. I think that let's call them lesser players or the ones that you don't necessarily put the spotlight on, they still should be contributing more, right?
Mm-hmm.
As I said, I'm not saying that Kuluveski is supposed to be at 20 goals and assists right now, but at least like 12, at least like over 10.
We're talking about total goal contributions. He's not even on 10. He's not even on 10, right? Like, and he only has so many games left.
Like at least 10, right? I would expect Maddison to be at like 15 or something, right? I think actually, like as much stick as I was giving to Richarlison, I actually have to agree with you. For that time when Sonny wasn't here, he actually bailed us out in many of the games. I think he actually relished the fact that he was the, let's call
someone
it,
had to step up. Like
someone had to step up, and it was him. The spotlight was on him, and he actually like delivered in that spell. The fact that as soon as Son came back, by the way, he stopped scoring is maybe a bit telling of like the way he sees himself as the main man, let's call it, right? But also, because I think we are talking about this in the background, right? I also want to say that yes, in a sense, we have a finishing problem, but I also think we have a bit of an like approach problem, in my opinion. I think we take too much time in trying to work the ball into the net instead of just taking risks from time to time. And I will yoink an opinion from the other channel, which I have, and I really liked it, right? I think we take more risks in front of our own box than in front of the opposition box. I think when we work the ball out of our defense, we take like huge risks, right? The way we play out of the back, and then we get to the forward line, and the opposition low blocks, and suddenly we just stop taking risks and we start passing it around. We are way too careful. We are way too afraid of losing the ball and getting transitioned, right? But if you lose the ball when like 8 out of 11 players of the opposition team are in the wrong box, then it's quite like easy to stop the transition, right? To get the ball off them again. That's what City do, right? City take risks, they lose the ball, but they have you so pinned in that even if you send a long ball, they usually just nick it off you, right? That's how they approach it.
They would much rather lose it in front of the opposition box than lose it in front of their own box. But Spurs seem the opposite, like where they're far more scared to lose it in front of the
they are not afraid to dribble and lose the ball. They are not afraid to try a through ball and lose the ball because they know they will take it back immediately, right? And I think that's what we are lacking. I think we are just trying too hard to look for like the perfect through ball or the perfect, over the top chip or whatever. I think first of all we should be taking more risks, like take more like a risk. Sorry, I'm talking about risks. I think we should just basically just throw a kitchen sink at it and see the results, right? And also something that I'm constantly saying, and I will say it again, why aren't we shooting more from distance? I think one of the ways to break the low block is shooting from distance, and we are not trying to do it, right? There are 3 ways: through balls, crosses, and shooting from distance. And I feel like we are focusing too much on through balls, way too much on through balls. We aren't shooting from distance, and we don't really have like a goal scoring striker in terms of like heading the ball. So that's why necessarily we can't really like do that many crosses, right? But I think especially that shooting from distance part of breaking a low block is absolutely missing. When Bentancur took a shot from distance against Fulham, I was really, really happy. One of the only positives from that game that I can think of, right?
It's like Spurs have forgotten the art of the scrappy goal all of a sudden.
Yeah,
Like when you do shoot it at the keeper is forced to make a save. Not always, especially if you strike it well enough, can they actually catch it. They will have to parry it. And we do see keepers will not really know who's around them or where to parry it to, or the shot's so good that actually they just have to get a hand to it. And that hand maybe gets poked to a player that's standing at the end of the net. They can
exactly
just
right.
tap it in. And how many times have Spurs done that this season? Not enough, it feels like, where we just have a shot on goal where there is that chance and just tap it in like nice and sort of
Yeah,
scrappy goal. And we see Arsenal do it all the time. We see Man City do it all the time. Believe me, especially Man City, I feel like do that all the time, where some of the goals they end up scoring are actually not that pretty, just sort of, overwhelming the goalkeeper and the opposition enough that then just sort of a bad deflection or a bad bounce goes their way. And all of a sudden, they get that go ahead goal that they've been looking for. And Spurs are not that team. They have, like you said, just tried to work the perfect goal, like as if the opposition are just training cones and, just motionless players that won't actually step in front of these passes or step in front of these through balls. Let's challenge the keeper. Let's actually, in a way, make our life easier on ourselves and maybe just go for a silly, scrappy goal and throw the kitchen sink at it, like you said there. I'm going to still say that Spurs do have a finishing problem
yeah.
this
I,
season.
I agree
I
with that
agree
one.
with you. It's on a mentality thing. Maybe it's not even the core hard numbers behind it. It's actually more a mentality thing. Certain players too reluctant, too unselfish, and then also maybe too reluctant to, like you say, just have a rip, have a chance. Like just
Yeah.
take that risk, like you were saying. Risk is the right word. Take that risk. And it doesn't feel like we do that enough. So is it really a lot of core numbers or anything like that and creative numbers that can support my argument? Probably not, actually. So you're welcome to slam me in the comments for it. But I'd say it's actually more on a mental kind of thing. And if that's only feelings and that's only just what we observe, but I'd agree with you there on that one. Final points from yourself there, Michael?
Yeah, so how should I put it? Like, I think when Ange came and the first interviews with him were published, I think he mentioned plenty of times that he wants his team to take the risk, that he wants his team to basically take things into their own hands and try to achieve something great. And the lashback for for failing, basically he takes it on his chest, right? He takes it on his back. He takes the responsibility for the mistakes that they make on the pitch, right? And I think we are still not yet at that point where our team has it drilled into them that they can take a risk, that they can basically take a swipe at it and see the results, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really ironic because I think the first 10 games, we always talk about the first 10 games, but I actually think in those first 10 games, we took a lot more risk. We basically tried something, right? If it doesn't work, I don't want to say that we all have to now pile on Ange whenever it doesn't work, right? But basically players played with more freedom, and I think that period after the Chelsea game, and it's even up until now, I think it scarred us a bit. I think we are playing a bit within ourselves, and it clearly can be seen in performances of many players. I think there are still some players that have this freedom of mind. Basically, I think Son, Poro, Udoji, Van de Ven, Romero, they take risks. They have fun on the field, and I think our wingers and even Maddison to an extent now, after coming from that injury, I don't think he plays with enough freedom, and I'd even
agree.
dare to say arrogance about him, right? Because
Totally.
you have to be a bit arrogant as a footballer if you play this style of play, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we are missing, and it can be translated into a finishing problem, right? Because as you said, we try to find the perfect chance. We don't succeed at it. That's why it looks like we often just aren't creative or dangerous enough. And even when we create a chance, then you can look at the numbers and say, listen, Kuluveski, Johnson, Werner, you need to score more. You actually need to put the ball into the back of the net more, right? Because the amount of chances that when we create a chance, it's actually quite a good chance. So now we need to finish, right?
This could be a wonder if I'm just finding a way to defend myself further, but I'd also be curious if some of the outperforming that we have done in that XG versus actual goals department could also be thanks to guys like Sonny, like Richarlison, who I think have buried chances this season that were probably very low, maybe on the XG marker. Like some of the headers that Richarlison has scored, I would say were probably very low, like, you know, surrounded by 3 center backs, perfect ball into the box, kind of out of nowhere, and he buried them. And then same thing with Sonny, with some of the chances that he's put away this season that he just does with relative ease. You could say maybe that could also be part of the reason. Maybe, like I said, maybe there's a bit of certain players like Madison, Johnson, Kuluveski, etc., that are actually being carried right by the performance and the clinical nature of Sonny, especially, maybe also Richarlison too. We'll leave it there, though, everybody. Please thank Michael for giving up his time and his day, having these difficult, hard conversations. I'm trying to make them kind of controversial so that maybe you could get mad at me for whatever question that I posed up. But I think we do try to get to the best, you know, sort of answer we can. And it's only our opinions at the end of the day. If you can for me, please smash that like button. Feel free to grab a membership, because there was another video that Michael and I did record that you guys could watch as well. That's only out there for the lovely members. But we'll leave you there, everybody. Come on, you Spurs. In the big Ange we trust. We never stop. See you.
The big Ange we trust. Coys.
Cool.